The feed went live without warning. Across thousands of worlds, on cracked screens, in forgotten colonies and high-definition arrays, in Dominion sanctuaries, it began with static. Then color. Then a girl, barely 16, eyes wide with terror, arms bound behind her back, was dragged into view by two figures in obsidian armor. The background was nondescript, a gray void interrupted only by a Dominion insignia pulsing in the corner. The camera held on her face, lit by sterile floodlights. Her name, according to the scrolling ticker below, was Kael Thorne. She was labeled a terrorist's daughter, a child of rebellion, a traitor by birth. Kael saw it as he descended through the upper atmosphere of Polaris 3. His cockpit lit up with the emergency alert, the signal overriding navigation protocols, forcing the transmission into every active channel. He muted it immediately, but not before he saw her face. Her mouth trembled, not with fear, but with fury held back by will alone. He knew that look. He had taught it to her. "Patch me in," he barked at his onboard AI. "Dominion relay," the voice replied. "Untraceable. High-level encryption. Origin unknown." He clenched the throttle. "Try harder." The AI said nothing. The feed continued in the corner of his vision, silent now, but mercilessly clear. A voice began narrating, cold, official, self-righteous. It detailed her lineage, her father's crimes, the resistance raids he had led. They called her a symbol of insurgent corruption, raised to hate order, to defy peace. The camera zoomed in. Her lips moved. No sound, but Kael read them. "I'm not afraid." Then came a blade. He didn't blink. He didn't look away. He owed her that. He watched as one of the armored figures raised the executioner's knife, ceremonial and cruel, and drew it across her neck in a slow, practiced motion. The broadcast cut to black with a single word, "Order." The cockpit was silent for 5 long seconds. "Sir," the AI began. Kael stood. "Change course," he said, disengaging autopilot. "Override destination. Track the source. Coordinates unstable. You'll breach zone law." "I didn't ask for legality," Kael snapped. "I asked for the origin." The AI hesitated, then flashed an approximated sector. Polar reach, deep Dominion territory, location of a known data nexus. Omega Node 9. He recognized the name. He remembered the old war maps, red lines slicing across frozen continents, forgotten bunkers buried beneath ancient ice. It was a Dominion research facility now, one of the few secure enough to stream a galaxy-wide feed without traceable exposure. "She's not dead," Kael muttered. "Sir, she's not dead," he repeated louder. That was a splice. An echo. They're using her. That feed was curated. The probability of a stage transmission is low. "Override probability," he growled. "She's alive." The AI recalculated. The ship tilted hard as Kael manually realigned their course toward the coordinates. Ember. He hadn't seen her in 7 months. Not since the failed extraction at Dreth Outpost. She had slipped through a Dominion blockade with a refugee crew, a decision he approved of but hated. He had told her to lie low, use a new name, vanish until he cleaned up the mess he made. She hadn't listened. Or maybe she had, and they had found her anyway. He touched the side panel, activating his comm recorder. "This is Kael Thorne, former captain, Resistance Unit Echo 7. If you're hearing this, I'm en route to Omega Node 9. Dominion protocol dictates no prisoners are kept post-broadcast. That means if I don't reach her in time, she dies for real. But I don't believe they've finished with her yet." He paused, swallowed. "I'm going to bring her back." He ended the message and encrypted it to transmit on a time delay, just in case. As the ship broke into orbit above the frozen wasteland of the polar reach, he studied the data again. No Dominion patrols. No satellite eyes. Too quiet. The Omega node didn't show any thermal life signatures above ground, but his scans told a different story. Underground power surges, energy readings that pulsed in rhythmic intervals like a heartbeat. They were alive down there. And so was she. Kael touched the worn edge of a photo glued beside his dash. Ember, 8 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, standing on his shoulders in a scrapyard beneath a falling sun. The memory burned brighter than the reactor core behind him. He dropped altitude fast, his craft streaking low over the jagged terrain. The Omega node came into view, just a sliver of steel jutting through a glacier, barely noticeable. No air defenses, no guards. But he knew better. The quiet meant they were waiting. He grabbed his rifle, checked the blade sheathed at his thigh, and loaded 2 EMP rounds into his gauntlet launcher. Then he sealed the ship's cabin and stepped into the wind. Snow blinded most sensors, but not his. He found the hidden lift entrance after 20 minutes of methodical scanning. It responded to a Dominion ID he had stolen years ago, groaned open like an ancient tomb, and swallowed him whole. The descent took 40 seconds. The lights flickered once, then stabilized. He moved silently through the corridor, rifle lowered but ready. The interior was too clean. No blood, no signs of struggle, just silence and order, like a Moor before the first scream. Then he saw it. A door, different from the rest. Reinforced, bio-sealed, and smeared with a single handprint, small, human. Her hand. He stepped closer, fingers hovering above the panel. And then, voices. He ducked back behind a support beam, heart hammering. 2 Dominion operatives walked past, their words clipped and robotic. Neural sync incomplete. She's resisting the template. Consciousness degradation at 16%. She won't last another cycle. Begin extraction. Preserve the vocal matrix. The broadcast was well received. Kael's pulse stilled. She was alive. Still resisting. Still fighting. He waited until the corridor fell silent again, then approached the door. This time, he didn't wait for it to open. He blew it off its hinges. The explosion was quick, precise. He moved through smoke and flame like a shadow with purpose. She was strapped to a vertical slab, arms bound by magnetic cuffs, head encased in a neural siphon. Her eyes fluttered open as he entered, and for a second, just one, she didn't recognize him. Then her lips curved. Even as tears streaked down her face. I knew you'd come. Kael stepped forward, blade humming in his palm. I'm sorry I took so long. The cold had returned. Kael stood on the ridge above the smoking ruins of Broadcast Station Delta 9, Ember's broken chain clenched in his gloved fist. Snow spiraled around him, blown sideways by the thermal shock waves still rising from the ground. His breath came in shallow, rhythmic intervals, fogging his visor, but he didn't wipe it away. The moment didn't deserve clarity. He was no longer just a father. He was a fuse waiting to be lit. Kael activated a small neural spike embedded in the base of his neck. His HUD flared to life, filling with flickering signal trails, encrypted comms, and fading biosignatures. Among them, a cluster blinked in dark red, cares and war nodes. They hadn't retreated. They were waiting. Unit status? He murmured. The AI responded immediately. 2 drones remaining. Power reserves at 61%. Stealth matrix at 23. Weapon reserves low. He exhaled slowly. This would not be clean. Beneath the ridge, a transport vessel lifted off. Sleek, triangular, its hull shimmered with reflective alloys, nearly invisible to most scanners. But not to him. Kael adjusted his optics, tracked the ship's trajectory, and tagged its heat trail. The Dominion wasn't just broadcasting executions. They were extracting something, someone. He descended the ridge in a crouch, footsteps silent despite the frozen earth. His cloak rippled and reformed around him, mimicking the color and texture of the terrain. Movement detection muted. Heart rate suppressed. He wasn't just a soldier. He had been engineered for infiltration, precision, extraction, and vengeance. Half a click down, he reached a crater where the ground had been blackened by plasma fire. Burned bodies lay half-melted among twisted steel, but one still breathed. A boy, no older than 16, his leg trapped beneath a fallen drone wing. Blood soaked through a makeshift bandage, and his chest rose in quick, panicked jerks. Kael hesitated. The mission came first, but Ember had once stopped him from walking past a wounded scavenger. If we don't save what's left, she'd said, then what's the point of fighting? Kael crouched, shoved the wing off with a grunt, and scanned the boy's vitals. Pulse erratic. Internal bleeding probable, the AI noted. Stabilize, Kael ordered. He tore open a med compartment and injected a dermal stabilizer into the boy's arm. The teen gasped, eyes wide, but Kael held a finger to his lips. Quiet. Who were you with? The boy blinked, trying to focus. Resistance. Outpost 32. We tried to jam the signal. They knew we were coming. Did you see where they went? After the execution? The boy nodded faintly. They took something from the vault. Not tech. A person. Described them. Couldn't see, but they said she was still alive. Kael froze. His body tensed, mind racing. Every instinct told him it was a trap. The girl was dead. He had seen it, heard it, but the Kerzin didn't lie without reason, and they didn't take corpses off the field. He injected the boy with another stabilizer. Stay here. You'll make it. Kael stood and turned toward the trail, his eyes sharper now. The ship's trajectory had been clear. A Dominion outpost in the polar expanse. Cold, remote, shielded. Even old maps barely listed it. The AI chimed again. Flight vector confirmed. Destination, Omega Node. He remembered Omega Node. It was where the Kerzin had first tested their mind-splicing tech. A place of silence and screams. If they had Ember's mind, or worse, her body, Kael would burn it from the ice. Within minutes, he reached his ship. A black arrowhead half buried in the snow. It shimmered into view only at his direct approach. The ramp hissed open, releasing a faint pulse of ionized air. Kael entered and immediately pulled the ship into ascent. Full silent. No comms. Keep me dark. Understood, the AI replied. As the craft cut through the atmosphere, the stars above widened. Earth became a blur of blue and ash behind him, and the horizon gave way to the pale shimmer of the polar expanse. Wind patterns in the ionosphere howled like broken glass. Radiation levels climbed. The Kerzin liked hiding in hellscapes. ETA, 9 minutes, the AI stated. Kael prepped his gear in silence. One last grenade. 2 auto-injectors. A thermal blade. No backup. No extraction window. He didn't need one. He pulled the chain from his belt and stared at it. Ember had made a game out of identifying the weak links in her handcuffs whenever he trained her. Nothing's unbreakable, she'd say, her voice full of quiet confidence. Not even fear. Kael had taught her too well. Now he had to become what she always saw in him. Not just a protector, but a predator. When the ship dropped beneath the clouds, the Omega Node came into view. An obsidian monolith half buried in ice, surrounded by a field of shimmering defenses. The sky above it danced with artificial auroras, camouflage for the Dominion's most secret facility. Kael spoke softly. Override cloak protocols. Initiate breach path. Defenses will detect after breach point 3, the AI warned. That's all the time I need. The ship veered hard, skimming the ice. Kael dropped through a hatch in the underbelly and hit the ground rolling, cloak already active. Ice cracked beneath his boots. Alarms hadn't sounded yet. The first breach point was a ventilation shaft, old and barely protected. He moved through it like vapor, avoiding the thermal sensors, timing his movements between magnetic pulses. It was all muscle memory now, just another infiltration. But this one had a name. At the third breach point, the alarms blared. Kael dropped into a corridor and moved fast, cutting down a drone with a single pulse round. 2 guards turned the corner. He was already on them, blades sweeping in an arc of blue light. He didn't stop. He reached the inner chamber, cold, white clinical, walls lined with containment units. Inside bodies, some suspended in fluid, others wired to machines. In the center was her, not dead, barely alive. Ember floated in a stasis tank, her eyes closed, her body covered in neural nodes and glowing circuitry. Her chest rose and fell, shallow but steady. Kael's hands shook. He stepped forward, smashed the console, and initiated emergency shutdown. Fluid drained. Lights flickered. She opened her eyes. Recognition. Pain. Relief. Dad. Then the room exploded. Kael threw himself over her, shielding her from debris. Heat roared. Walls collapsed. Cares and assassins stormed through the breach. Kael rose, blood on his face, eyes burning. They wanted war. He would give them extinction. The air was thick with smoke and ionized debris. Sirens shrieked behind the walls of fractured metal, dissonant and stuttering, like the dying breaths of a machine gasping for relevance. Kael moved through the ruin with a predator's stillness. Ember pressed against his chest, barely conscious but alive. Her heartbeat, ragged, staggered, tapped against his armor like a message too faint to understand. Every step forward was an act of faith and fury. They had taken her voice, her freedom, nearly her life. They hadn't taken her spirit. He could feel it, trembling through her bones as if her very cells rejected captivity. That flame, dimmed but not extinguished, was his beacon through the chaos. Behind him, plasma round stitched patterns across the corridor walls. The Dominion's elite had entered the field, taller than men, armored in bioreactive plating, their rifles humming with lethal intent. Kael ducked behind a fallen beam and dropped a stun mine. The explosion didn't kill them. That wasn't the point. Their optics shorted for 4 seconds. He only needed 2. He surged from the shadows and became a blur of motion. His blade severed breathing tubes, sliced through joints, found gaps in armor like a whisper of death. He didn't breathe. He didn't blink. He didn't stop until the corridor was silent. Ember groaned softly, her hand twitching against his forearm. "You're safe," Kael said, lowering her to the floor behind a collapsed column. "Stay awake." She blinked, dazed. How long?" He checked her vitals. Her neural activity was spiking in unstable patterns. The Dominion had linked her consciousness to their data stream, turned her into a conduit, maybe even a living archive. "Too long," he answered, voice tight. "But I'm here now. I'm not leaving." She reached for his chest, fingers curling around a piece of his armor. "They showed me things. Plans. Cities they'll take. People they'll erase." Kael leaned in, his eyes searching hers. "What do they want from you?" "Me," she whispered. "Just me." He paused, feeling the weight of it. Not her knowledge, not her DNA, not a weapon to wield, but a symbol, a story they could control. An innocent turned into a cautionary tale, a message to the resistance. He wouldn't let them write it. "We're getting out," Kael said. Her smile was faint. "You always say that, and I always do." He hoisted her over his shoulder and sprinted toward the extraction zone. The Omega Node's power grid was fluctuating. His AI had triggered an internal overload. Lights flickered and dimmed. Doors refused to open. Some shut permanently, trapping guards inside containment wings. Kael took a route through the maintenance shafts. Narrow, dark and slick with condensation. They twisted like the veins of the complex. He moved fast, not thinking, only reacting, until he emerged in a hangar he hadn't planned to see again. The Dominion gunship stood in the center. Sleek, silent, deadly. The same model he'd tracked from the broadcast station. They hadn't launched it. They were expecting him. Too late to backtrack. Kael took position behind a crate, setting Ember down gently. Her eyelids fluttered. Her skin was pale as the snow outside, but she was alive. "Stay down," he whispered. "No matter what." She nodded barely. The hangar filled with a low-pitched hum. From the far end, the Kerzen leader stepped into view. 7 feet tall, skin like obsidian armor. 6 eyes that glowed with logic and loathing. Its voice echoed before its mouth moved, as though it spoke through time as well as space. Kael Thorne. Father. Killer. Failure. Kael rose, blade in one hand, pistol in the other. "You talk too much." The Kerzen extended its limbs, unfolding hidden blades and emitters. She was to be the key, the turning point. But now, you will simply watch her end. Again, Kael moved, not with fury, but with purpose. He charged low, ducking under a plasma arc, fired 3 shots. 2 missed. 1 sparked off the Kerzen's shoulder, drawing a shriek of distortion. They collided with a crash that bent the floor plating, Kael's blade driving upward, deflected by an armored claw. The Kerzen struck back, talons slicing the air where his face had been moments before. Kael countered, twisting under the creature's reach, driving a shock emitter into its ribs. Electricity flared, staggering the alien. Kael didn't press. He turned, grabbed Ember, and bolted for the gunship. The Kerzen roared, voice shaking the walls. "You cannot escape fate, human." Kael shouted over his shoulder, "I don't believe in fate." He slammed his fist into the ship's access port. It resisted, then the AI hacked the override. The hatch hissed open. Kael secured Ember inside, sealed the chamber, and spun the cockpit systems to life. But the Kerzen was already on the hull, claws sinking into the metal, tearing through like paper. The ship lifted a meter off the ground, shuddering under the strain. "Altitude," Kael ordered. The AI hesitated. "External breach in progress." "Altitude now." The ship surged upward, scraping against the hangar ceiling. The Kerzen clung to the side, ripping paneling apart. Sparks flew. Systems faltered. Kael activated the internal discharge protocol. The hull surged with anti-tamper electricity. The Kerzen screamed, no sound, only a burst of distortion, and flung itself off the side, crashing to the ground below as the gunship soared free. Kael guided the craft into the clouds, blood in his mouth and fire behind his eyes. Plot course to orbital relay. "We're not done." Ember stirred again. Her voice was a whisper. "Do we make it?" Kael looked down at her. "Not yet, but we will." As the stars opened above them and the Dominion's stronghold shrank behind, he allowed himself a single breath of belief. Not hope. Hope was for the unbloodied. But belief was a weapon, and he still had one more fight left in him. The orbital relay came into view, a skeletal ring suspended in the vacuum, rotating slowly above Earth's horizon. Its surface shimmered with worn solar panels and fractured shielding, a relic from a war barely remembered by most. Kael guided the Dominion gunship through the approach corridor, systems flickering from overuse, hull still bleeding heat from the polar escape. Inside the cockpit, Ember's pulse steadied under the medcom's care. Her body rested in the acceleration cradle, wrapped in thermal gel, her mind recovering from whatever neural encryption the Kerzen had forced on her. Kael's eyes lingered on her face. Though still pale, there was something unyielding in the tension of her brow, a quiet defiance even in unconsciousness. She hadn't broken. He couldn't let the universe believe she had. Clearance, he barked to the relay's comm array. A burst of static responded, followed by a grizzled voice. Unmarked vessel, you're approaching a restricted resistance sector. Identify or prepare for boarding. Kael transmitted his clearance code. Not his real one. Not anymore. But close enough to confuse the system. Seconds passed. Then, Kael Thorne, you're supposed to be dead. I'm not. And the girl? She's the reason I'm not. The relay's docking bay unsealed, and Kael landed the ship without ceremony. Within minutes, resistance medics swarmed the cradle, lifting Ember onto a hoverbed and wheeling her through sterilization chambers. He followed them, silent, armor scored and smoke-streaked, his eyes unmoving. Inside the medical chamber, Commander Roan waited. Once Kael's superior, now a reluctant ally. You're making noise, Thorne, Roan said, arms crossed. The Kerzin are mobilizing. Broadcast nodes have gone dark. You started something. No, Kael said. They did. I'm finishing it. Roan glanced at Ember through the glass. You retrieve her alive. How? They didn't want her dead, Kael said. Not really. They wanted her story. Wanted control of it. Her death was staged. What aired was a decoy. Roan's jaw tightened. Why fake it? Why go to the trouble? Kael looked down at the floor. They were testing something. Splice tech. I think they were trying to imprint her mind onto their Nexus grid. If they succeeded, she's more than just data. They've mapped her consciousness. Roan stiffened. That's extinction-level technology. Kael nodded, and they used a child to prototype it. The silence between them was heavier than gravity. Roan spoke carefully. You have a plan? Kael didn't hesitate. We make her story real. Roan raised a brow. What do you mean? They wanted the galaxy to believe the Kerzin killed her. That resistance was futile. That all we do ends in a noose. But they failed. She's alive. And we're going to broadcast that truth. Everywhere. You want to reverse their signal? Kael nodded. Hijack the same pipeline. Let them see what we survived. Let them see what we're becoming. Roan folded his arms. You're turning her into a symbol. I'm letting her choose. But I think she's already chosen. 3 hours later, Ember woke. The med-chamber lights dimmed automatically as her eyes opened, blinking slowly, pupils adjusting to the sterile white. Kael sat beside her, back straight, exhaustion tucked behind control. She smiled faintly. You look terrible. He managed a half-laugh. You should see the other guy. She tried to sit up. Failed. Kael eased her forward with one hand behind her shoulders. Where are we? She asked. Relay 9. Safe for now. The resistance is watching. Her gaze hardened. They saw the execution, didn't they? Yes, he said. The whole galaxy did. She looked away. Then they think I'm dead. Kael waited. I'm not hiding, she said more firmly. If they want my voice so badly, they'll get it. On my terms. He nodded slowly. We'll set up the feed. You'll speak. You say what they didn't let you say. Good, she said, voice hoarse. But I want them to see my face. The same face they thought they erased. Hours later, the relay's communication chamber hummed to life. Outdated, patched together with scavenged Dominion tech, but functional. Kael stood behind Ember as she faced the cam lens, her scars visible, her voice unfiltered. Her image was beamed into every surviving resistance frequency. Then, with AI subversion, into the Dominion's networks too. She spoke with trembling confidence. My name is Ember Thorne. You watched them kill me. You believed I was gone. But I'm alive. And I remember everything. She paused. They wanted to turn me into a warning. A symbol of defeat. But I am not a warning. I am the beginning of a different message. Across the galaxy, screens flickered. In war rooms, rebel enclaves, occupied cities. Even within Dominion-controlled colonies, where fear had smothered hope, Her voice pierced through like light under a sealed door. We don't have to die quietly. We don't have to let them control the truth. I'm still here, and I'm not afraid. The feed ended. The silence that followed was the sharp, waiting kind, like a battlefield just before the first shot. Kael turned to her. You just declared war. She looked at him. No. I reminded them we never stopped fighting. Moments later, a proximity alert sounded. Roan's voice came through the intercom. Incoming Kersen vessels. For cruisers. No warning. No dialogue. Kael looked to Ember. You ready? She nodded. Let's finish what they started. Roan met them at the defense ring. We'll be outnumbered 10-1. Kael smiled grimly. Then they'll have to count fast. The first blast rocked the relay, tearing through its outer edge. Explosions rippled through the hull as Dominion drones poured in. Faceless, tireless, silent. Kael led the charge. Every corridor became a proving ground. Every shadow a snare. He moved through the carnage with calculated violence. Ember behind him with a shock rifle, refusing to stay out of reach. Her fear was gone now, burned out and replaced with something stronger, resolve. In the heart of the relay, where the reactor thrummed with unstable energy, Kael faced the Kersen leader once more. The creature stared at Ember. You were supposed to be a martyr. I became something worse, she replied. Oh! Kael lunged before it could reply. They collided amid fire and steam, blades locking, limbs scraping metal. This time, there was no hesitation. No doubt. He was not fighting for vengeance anymore. He was fighting to preserve the proof that they had survived. Ember fired the final shot. A bolt of blue plasma seared into the creature's skull, ending it with a burst of light and memory. The Dominion ships retreated seconds later, not because they feared death, but because they feared the story. Kael stood beside Ember in the ruined relay. Flames smoldered in the walls. The Resistance survivors gathered, watching them. The war hadn't ended, but the tide had shifted. Ember looked up at her father. What happens now? Kael didn't answer right away. He placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and proud. Now, he said, they learn what it means to lose.